What's up? It's Marco, Sage of Soccer, and recently I saw a rumor linking Gabriel Slonina with a move to Juventus. While this rumor will almost certainly not end up happening, at least at the moment, there was something interesting I found about it, and that was the reaction to the transfer rumor, and it was basically a universal consensus that he should rather stay at Chicago Fire than head over to Juventus and go play in their U23 team. And while I can see the benefits of that, it's pretty obvious. Consistent first team minutes that makes you a better player. You won't possibly go to Europe and get stuck extremely far down the depth chart. And then there's the obvious, it's hard going to Europe at a young age. At any age, really. The culture shock could be a bad thing for him. So I can understand completely the argument for him to stay in the MLS, and I agree with a lot of it. But I don't get why it was just such a universal decision, because there are some big benefits of going to Europe, even at that age, and staying in the MLS isn't the greatest thing. So, again, while I don't completely disagree with him staying, I just wanted to talk about a different argument. And first thing is, his time in the MLS isn't as huge as it's being made out to be. Now, something amazing about Gabriel Slonina is, at the moment, he is the most valuable goalkeeper born in 2004 in the world, according to Transfer Market. So you might say, wow, he must be up there with some of the top prospects, maybe like the next Neuer, maybe some dude in Italy's looking like the next Donnarumma, some prospect in England. Well, no. Looking at the list, behind him is Jeff Dusnap, the American prospect. Also, a kid from the New Zealand Central League. In fact, there's only one player in the top 10 from a traditional soccer powerhouse, one German in there, and it's because goalkeepers don't usually make their debuts at this age. They really don't. You have some rare cases, but typically it's not something you see happen. So unless all of a sudden the top keepers in the world start coming from New Zealand and Austria, I don't feel like a goalkeeper should be really be that judged by what they're doing at 17. So playing time, that alone just isn't that important for their development at this age, and I would rather have him be training with one of the top staffs in the world than Chicago Fire. No disrespect, but you know. But you might say that's very specific to goalkeepers, and we're kind of talking about more general MLS players. And what if you just disagree and you believe playing competitive first-team matches is the most important thing for a player? Well, if you believe in playing competitive first-team matches, I would argue, why do you want Slonina to stay in the MLS? Now, hear me out, because this is a point that I've been thinking about for a while, but when Slonina was given his debut, the Chicago Fire were second from the bottom in the Eastern Conference. They had no hopes of making the playoffs, and their season was already over. The game was meaningless. In fact, every MLS game that Slonina played for the Chicago Fire was meaningless in the grand schemes of things. I mean, while it's impressive to make his debut, it's basically the same thing as Liverpool handing a debut to somebody in the Champions League after they've already advanced. I mean, sure, it's amazing. You have to be happy for the players. You get to see how they can be, but the club viewed this game as meaningless. And if Chicago doesn't look like they're going to be better next year, I mean, the offseason's still early, but it's not looking great. And if he's at the bottom of the league, again, in a league that doesn't have relegation, he's basically playing glorified friendlies. Like, these aren't truly competitive games. I've talked about this before in relegation videos. I think Chris Richards, DeAndre Yedlin, they have talked about this before, and I don't believe that this is truly helping his development as much as it should, because there are really no consequences for poor performances outside of things like he could lose his spot, but that happens in training anyway. I really don't feel like staying in the MLS, especially should Chicago not be good, which it doesn't look like they'll be, is going to be the biggest thing for him. Next, the playing time that we are talking about, that's not exactly guaranteed. Do you remember the most valuable 04 goalkeepers? Well, knocking on the door to the top 10 is Slonina's teammate Chris Brady. He is already competing with a very strong goalkeeper at his own position. And honestly, if Chicago Fire truly want to push for a playoff spot, do you think they're going to stick with the 17-year-old goalkeeper? I mean, keep in mind, New York Red Bull didn't start Caden Clark in the playoffs. I mean, the only real American prospects that got time were Daryl DK, George Bello, James Sands, Cole Bassett. I think you can count David Ochoa. I know he's not playing for us, but he's a homegrown. And Philadelphia Union players due to circumstances. So, I mean, there is a chance that he could become that guy on a good team like David Ochoa did, but John Pulskamp couldn't find time for Sporting Kansas City. Matt Freese only plays when Andre Blake is away, and if we're talking about guys who are looking at a move to Europe, Justin Shea didn't become a regular for FC Dallas. He got some playing time, but they didn't stick with him. So I just wanted to say, staying in the MLS doesn't guarantee consistent playing time, and even if it does, it might not be that valuable. So what about going abroad? I mean, we've seen some players basically get stuck in backup positions, and among young prospects, Chicharo Ndunze, CJ Dos Santos, they don't really seem close to first-team appearances. Well, with those two in particular, I'd say that keepers develop late, so I wouldn't really be worried about that anyway. I was looking at England's top goalkeeper prospects. They have, like, Freddie Woodman, he's not exactly a starter. Joseph Bursik, he's not exactly a starter. Like, their U21 team isn't full of starting goalkeepers. So I don't feel like we should be worried about Chicharo Ndunze's development. So, and I just want to follow the career path of Zach Steffen, because he's our starting goalkeeper. He left to go to Europe, so at Slonina's current age, Zach Steffen left the Philadelphia Union Academy to attend college. He played at the University of Maryland for 2 years, and then he went to Freiburg in Germany. He didn't play at all his first year. Then in his second season, he played for the reserves team, and then he moved back to the MLS before his third season. That was basically the worst case scenario that could have happened. The biggest fear we have for players when they go to Europe, and he's the starting goalkeeper. Because when he came back, he was only 22. He was basically a baby for a goalkeeper. Like, the worst case scenario wasn't even that bad. And Gabriel Slonina, he's a really young goalkeeper, so should he head to Europe? And should things go wrong, there's still a very good possibility that he could turn out to be a good player. And honestly, that's taking out the possibility that Slonina could just develop greatly, prove that he is the most valuable goalkeeper at his age group, and become a starter eventually, or even become good enough to become loaned out to a different club. Like, there certainly is a risk to heading to Europe, but how much of a risk is it? And also, what about the reward? I mean, compare our European goalkeepers, Zach Steffen and Ethan Horvath, to Matt Turner. They stand out as far better players with the ball at their feet. And I feel like it's because of their time in Europe. While the MLS quality isn't, like, far below, let's say, heading to Austria or the second tier of, like, France, Italy, Germany, like, I'd compare them. I feel like they're a good comparison in terms of overall quality. But the style of play is different. It becomes a lot more technical. The game's a lot quicker. Brendan Aronson was talking about this when he was talking about his move to Austria. And because of that, you have to make developments in order to keep up. We've seen huge jumps from Brendan Aronson and from someone like a Gianluca Busio. And sure, it comes from natural progression from just being older, but their development has been dramatic. The same would go for goalkeepers. When playing the ball at the back is vital for several teams, being good with the ball at your feet becomes crucial. And I feel like this would lead to Slonina becoming a better all-around player, even if he isn't playing in every single week. And also, should he go to Juventus? Like, going up against the top prospects in Italy every single day in training, that definitely can't hurt your development. I mean, there's a reason why Zach Steffen, who's the backup at Man City, is able to come in for the USA national team. I'm sure going up against KDB and Sterling every day in training, that's probably helping him a lot. And also, I want to mention this again, the chance of him breaking into the first team is real. Weston McKennie and Chris Richards both weighed in the reserves before becoming Bundesliga regulars, and they moved before their MLS debuts. And for us being so high on our prospects and really having a good sense of what our future can be, we really don't seem confident in our players. I understand the risk, but Slonina could easily break through in Europe. And if he does, and he becomes a keeper in a top 5 league, or if he starts for Juventus, Jesus. And lastly, just forgetting everything from Slonina and looking at it from a selfish national team perspective, which you shouldn't do, but I just wanted to bring it up. why wouldn't we want him to move? Should it work out and he's playing every week in Europe and becoming a better player, that is huge. And should it not, he can come back. We've seen it with Zach Steffen. It's possible to do that. And honestly, even if it completely ruins him, which it won't, but if it does, his spot's going to Chris Brady. We still have a top prospect in Chicago. This isn't how you should look at that situation. I'll say that again, but I just thought I should mention it. Now, I really don't think this rumored move to Juventus will happen. At the very least, it's not going to happen this window. And I feel like playing another season in the MLS and raising his stock could definitely help Slonina. But this time next year, if he's still a starter who looks like a great prospect, just remember the upsides of moving abroad, even at the cost of playing time. So I'll talk about right now. See ya.